Welcome to the Digital Chair by SalonMonster, a podcast for indie beauty pros and salon owners who'd rather be themselves than follow the rules. I'm your host, Liam, and this week we'll be talking with Ashlee Norman about mentorship, theory, repetition, and building depth behind the chair. I hope you enjoy it.
So my name is Ashlee Norman. I am a hairstylist and an independent educator, as well as a mother of three. I have an independent education brand. I typically travel to 15 to 20 cities a year, teaching about 2 to 3 classes in each city for an average of 45 classes a year.
Wow.
I also have sponsorships with 3 global brands. So I'm an international artist for K18 Hair, Schwarzkopf USA, as well as Bumble and Bumble.
Awesome.
Yeah, I have an independent tool brand. So I actually started creating my own custom tools with the help of my family, probably in about 2016, 17. And I also do booths at trade shows to showcase my patented designs. I
Okay.
have a business partner. Her name is Christine Carver. She also has some patented designs as well as designs all of my apparel merchandise, including my signature tool belt.
Wow.
What else? I have an online education platform that I have been developing since 2018. So lots of extensive education available online for both haircut and coloring. And it's my daughter's birthday today, so she's turning 8.
Today, oh my goodness, we
Yep.
could have done this another time.
Oh, that's
Cutie
okay.
8. Which child is this in the set of
So
3?
she's the middle child.
Okay.
So she is my only girl, and she's a middle child, and she's a Taurus, and she is very spicy.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah.
3 kids and you're on the road. That's a lot.
Yes, yeah. So I married my high school sweetheart when I was 19. And thank God he is a wonderful Christian man who has been supportive of me from the very beginning. He's my number one fan. And he was a structural design engineer, has his master's degree in structural engineering. He has his PE and his SE, which is his professional and structural engineer's license. So his license to build skyscrapers, schools, and hospitals. He was running the grid of Southern California, the one that kept burning down,
Yeah.
before he quit and started supporting me full time.
Wow.
So he is officially my business partner, CFO, and the primary stay-at-home parent.
Nice.
Yeah, he does have a job that he can do contractually when he is available, which
Sure.
is not very often
Yep.
because I keep him pretty busy along with the 3 kids. But it is nice that he gets to do it just to kind of, he says, scratch that itch because it's a different level of thinking. But yeah, so he is the one who stays home and manages the home while I do the travel.
That's amazing. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Um, that's so many things. I wouldn't even know where to begin. That's so many things you're doing. How do you do that with 3 kids? I understand you have, a partner that stays at home, which helps, but doesn't make it easy. I mean, it's not.
No.
It's just sort of like an emergency, not really a thing that makes it easier. And you said 45 cities, did you say, or 45
15 to 20
locations?
cities. Yeah, 15 to 20 cities. Usually it's like, a couple different course topics within that weekend. So I might teach like a color class on day 1 and a haircut on day 2. And so people can decide which days they want to attend, depending on the course topic. Sometimes they attend, 2 to 3 classes within a weekend. So that's why I say it's like it ends up being about 45 classes if you count each topic individually.
Right. Wow, that's bananas.
Yeah.
Um, how long have you been how long have you been doing hair? And then how long have you been educating? At what point did that happen?
Yeah, so I went to beauty school in high school when I was 17 through
Okay.
RLP cosmetology.
Okay.
So I went to high school half a day and then I would drive down to beauty school. And then I finished right around the time I was turning 19 in 2005. I graduated. And then I was pretty much went right to the floor, and I really wasn't
Yeah.
ready. So I definitely struggled for the first couple of years on the floor. I was
Yep.
also a newlywed, and I was going to school at night for my bachelor's degree, which I also have a bachelor's degree in fashion merchandising and business marketing. It took me about 8 years to do at night while working full time behind the chair.
Wow.
Yeah, so definitely been hustling a long time. I started in the education space, I would say about 2007, not because
Okay.
I was ready or qualified, but because there really wasn't an
No.
internal education opportunity, so I had to create one. So there was a salon that opened, and it was a Bumble and Bumble exclusive salon. My personal hairstylist, who was kind of my mom mentor in the industry, was the one who opened it, and she brought me on and she made me her network educator. So basically, what that means is it was a liaison program that Bumble and Bumble had back in the day, where one stylist within an exclusive Bumble network salon was selected to go and continue their education annually at the House of Bumble in New York City. And then we
Okay.
would come and do teach back. So we would basically go take the class and then teach it back to the rest of the staff. So within that time period from about 2007 to 2014, I was not only taking classes with Bumble in New York, but I was going to Sassoons and Tony and Guy, DePetro Todd, Wello World Studios. So I flew everywhere from New York, LA, San Francisco, London, Paris, easily spent $100,000 on my continuing education. Every single class that I took, I taught back to my team, along with building out their assistant program, which
Awesome.
we grew the salon from about, I think when we started was only like 6 or 7 stylists. And when I left, it was like close to 30. So
Wow.
we did a really good job within that time frame in terms of building a brand new salon, expanding it, and it was really busy. It was really amazing. It was definitely, there's some fond memories within that time period for sure.
That would have been intense though. Yeah, I mean it's funny that education, it seems like there was so much, like I started hair in 99. There was access to so much less unless you were paying to fly to a place that had one of the schools, like not just a whatever hair school, but like you're going to Sassoon or you're going to a Bumble Academy or you're going to a Tony and Guy Academy. There wasn't access to much. And so you were talking about not being ready when you went on the floor. Is anyone, like, are any of us? I feel like almost no one is on the floor and should be on the floor and is ready to be on the floor. Same with educating. I mean, most people, when they start educating, you can't know how to educate before you educate often. There's not a lot of education schools for educators. It exists
Yeah.
kind of, but not much.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, the only really facilitation classes I had was at Bumble, and they would
yeah,
film us actually educating, and we'd all have to sit and watch ourselves back, and we would have a whole room like of, other people where we were not criticizing, but giving constructive, like, hey, like, you could have done this better, you could have stood here better, you know, so there really isn't. But at the same time, it's just like you have to practice, like anything, like a
yeah,
sport, like a craft. Like the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? So that's what it comes down to, is the proofs and the experience as well.
yeah. Did you love education right away?
I did, yeah, and I didn't do it in like a I'm going to be an educator. I never thought that. It was never like a specific ambition. It was more of a, well, I made a lot of mistakes and it was really painful, and I would like you to not have to suffer. So here's the little amount of knowledge that I know. And as I learn, I'm going to teach you.
Yeah,
And so that's really where the heart of it came in, from the beginning. And then when it came to the independent education piece, again, it was never like, oh, I'm going to be a traveling independent educator. No, I just was, posting my work as social media evolved. It started with Facebook, and then it moved into
hmm,
Instagram, and I was just putting up my work and my formulas and just, sharing. And somebody commented like, hey, would you ever teach a class outside of your salon? And that thought never had occurred to me. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'll try it. And then as soon as I did, it was like, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. But then at the same time, me and my husband had just decided to start a family. And so I was 6 weeks pregnant at my first independent education class. That was like
oof,
50 people for like a balayage demo in Pasadena. And then it was like, well, let's, come out of state and do this and do that. And it's like, wow, how am I going to become a mom and start traveling to all of these different states. And so that was a pretty scary time frame.
No doubt. I mean, do you need any more reason to already feel weird than being 6 weeks pregnant and teaching elsewhere? That would be tough.
Yeah.
Well, nice work. Um, so when you started doing, I mean, I always love hearing the story about how it just happens. That seems like, especially for when you got into education, it seems like it's not like there was a pipeline or a funnel that people would go into and end up. Sometimes people, it seems like, ended up at one of the 2 or 3 types of academies or salons where you were lucky enough to have that happen. So you have somebody just contact you, you go, but you're also pregnant. At what point did you realize it was a thing? I mean, obviously somebody contacted you and said, would you come and do this? How long did it take before you decided to make that a brand?
Well, I think I was at a crossroads anyway in my career. So I had worked with my salon owner mentor, and I actually had made her an offer for a business partnership that she turned down.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
when she turned me down, I was really devastated because I had felt like, it's almost like you're dating someone for 10 years and then you're like, hey, let's put a ring on it. And then they're like, actually, never mind. And then she ended up like partnering with somebody else very quickly,
Oof.
with a less, uh, not as good of an offer. So I was like, whoa, okay. Um, but it's interesting because sometimes, rejection is actually redirection. And here I was grieving the fact that I wasn't going to become, the business owner to lead a team of whatever 20 something, 30 stylists. Instead, God had bigger plans for me to go and quite literally lead, hairstylists around the world. So,
Yeah.
you know, um, I had just graduated my bachelor's degree, and my husband had just finished his master's. And he was like, hey, look, we've been married for about what, 8 or 9 years. And we had done the Dave Ramsey program, which is like a very intense financial program to like, save money and pay off debt and like buy a house, so we had done all the things. Like we got
Right.
married super freaking young, and everybody was like, what are you doing? You're probably just going to end up in divorce. And like, why are you marrying your high school sweetheart? You should probably date around, but we were Christian, and I was going to move in with him when he graduated his bachelor's anyway. And I was like, well, as long as we're going to move in together, we might as well get married. And so we did that, and it was a very controversial decision. And we were 19 and 22 years old. He had just graduated and just got his job at Edison. He was a new engineer. We didn't have any money to put a down payment on I think we had like a less than 500 square foot studio apartment where
Hmm.
everything was all in one room. And commuting through LA traffic 60 miles each way, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get on your 6 a.m. carpool van, and then driving into the valley to go to school at night for his master's and my bachelor's, and me working behind the chair and trying to build as a stylist. Like, it was a very tough time, especially because when we got married, it was 2006, which, if people know, is the last peak in the economy. And so
Hmm.
we were looking at houses, and people were like, oh yeah, it's normal to be 50% debt to income on a home. And we're like,
Sure.
excuse me? Like,
Is
so
that
we're gonna buy this house, have no furniture, and eat like fucking mac and cheese, pardon my French, like on the floor because we have no couch. Like, so like it didn't really the math wasn't mathing.
yeah.
And we were like, how are we gonna achieve the American dream? We wanted the 2.5 kids in the house. And um and Los Angeles being one of the most expensive cities in
Hmm.
the US to afford, it was like, how? So we worked our asses off. And I remember, I mean, I have this journal that I still write in, and it was started from that time frame, and I read it and I'm just like, wow. Because sometimes you got to go back to the beginning to remember where you started, because there's challenges now, and it's like, but at the same time, it's like we were living in this shoebox, and we had you know these cars that were just used vehicles that got good gas mileage, and we were just driving our asses off through LA traffic and just saving money and living so cheaply. And we were like, is this going to pay off? Like, no one else in our generation is doing this. Like, we looked around and all the 20-year-olds in our same generation were living at home, leasing a luxury vehicle, going
Yeah.
out every weekend, wearing
Yes.
designer clothes, going to Starbucks every day. And we're like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yep.
Like, so, it paid off like big time.
Yeah.
We ended up being able to put about 50% down on a house in 2011 at the bottom of the crash after the stock market crashed in 2008. And we continued to live underneath our means and actually paid off that first home in 3 years.
Wow.
So,
What a great time to have bought too. Like to be in the position to do that, to
right.
have not done the 50% thing
That's
and
right.
probably have foreclosed shortly
That's
after.
right. And we saw a lot of our friends do that. We saw friends,
Yeah.
even our parents were like, just get the biggest mortgage you can get because, it's LA, like the prices are always going to go up. And like, thank God my husband, I mean, he was 22. And this man, I swear to God, he's genius. He started researching and he found this blog. It was called Dr. Housing Bubble, and it
Mm-hmm.
talked about these mortgages that were going on within that time frame, because if you remember, there was
I do.
very loose lending standards, and that's what led to that crazy run up in home prices in
Yeah.
comparison to the average income. And so these people were going in and not verifying their income and just buying these houses that they really couldn't afford in hopes that the price would continue to go up and then they would just refinance.
Yeah.
Well, instead, the economy crashed, the housing prices went down, they could not refinance, they couldn't pay their mortgage. And so they just, short closed, and
Yeah.
ended up with bad credit for another decade. So they couldn't even buy in when it was good in 2011. So just that one fact alone, that we were faithful, not only like in terms of like living beneath our means, but also paying attention and not doing something financially irresponsible, even though everyone
Yeah.
else around us was. Because I mean, if you're a newlywed and you've lost 250,000, that, I mean, we saw people go through divorces. That
Oh
that
yeah.
shit ruined marriages.
Yes. Yes. It can ruin almost anything. Yes. No,
Yeah,
no, no. There's no, you can't. No. It will crush you. It
yeah,
will crush you. It's hard to like anyone when you're going through that.
right.
Um, and we do have a tendency to blame. It can be really hard to stay on point, stay on message, like to keep doing this, to sticking with the plan, especially when, I mean, you're right, money was free. I mean, it was, if you had a pulse and could breathe air, people were
Yeah.
giving money away. You can buy anything you want. It was crazy.
Yep.
Um, well, that's awesome. So staying on message, sticking with it, a little bit of luck, obviously. It's always nice when a little bit of smarts and a little bit of luck meet up. Um, that's so great that that worked out. So you were prepared to go independent to run a business. You were already in a position to be able to wrap your head around good choices and bad choices. Um, so it started, it sounds like, by being invited to like a few salons here and there. At what point did it turn into platform work and stages and you know, the next set of things? I don't know if that counts as bigger. It's not like it pays a bunch of money to be at a hair show, but you know what I mean. Um,
Yeah.
at what point did that transition happen? The brand is going and you're going on stage and representing other companies and
Yeah. So, going back to like 2015, when I was like starting out, I taught this first class and then I got this offer to teach out of state. And I went to my salon owner and I was like, hey, so I just got this offer to teach out of state. And she was like, you can't become an independent traveling educator. Like you're pregnant, like you're about to become a mom. And I think that's really when it clicked, because I was like, okay, so first you're going to turn me down for this business partnership. And now you're going to say what I can't do. And so I was like, all right, now I'm going to do it. So I think that
I might
somehow
have
is like,
considered not doing it,
I was like, that
but now
now
I'm
is
doing it.
reverse psychology.
Yeah.
So, but I think that challenge to be like, okay, well, clearly this path has come to an end, and I need to keep moving forward and find the next thing. And so at that point, I just kind of looked at my pregnancy as a 9-month deadline. And
Right.
so I just went hard, like literally taught and traveled all the way through until I was like probably 4 weeks before I gave birth.
Yep.
So I was teaching my last travel class. They wouldn't let me on a plane past a certain number of weeks. So
I was just gonna ask. Okay, yeah.
I
Wow.
drove myself to go teach in Las Vegas where I live now, which is kind of ironic. And I taught at this salon and I did a 2-day class back to back. And I mean, my ankles had ankles, so like I had like 3 rolls on my feet. Like at this point I couldn't even put shoes on. I was in these like flip floppy things with like, and even that was like putting marks into the skin of my feet. So it was pretty crazy. I worked 50 hours a week, behind the chair, and then I just traveled and I taught every weekend I could. And as soon as I had my son, I already had a wait list of salons waiting. And my mother-in-law at the same time was a special needs teacher for about 30 years, and she had wanted to retire but couldn't financially afford it. So we
Right.
sat her down and we said, look, my husband did my numbers and he was like, I think we can afford to pay my mom. And so we're like, hey,
Awesome.
would you want to be my traveling nanny essentially? And so she started traveling with me when my son was about 4 months old, and we
Amazing.
just took him everywhere with us until he was about 18 months. And then he started staying home. And then I got pregnant with my daughter, did it with my daughter, started traveling with her. Sometimes it was both of them. We were like renting an Airbnb, and it was like, a toddler and an infant and my team members. It was just, yeah, I mean, it was a freaking circus, right?
Yeah.
And both of my babies, they had passports before they were 1. So I took my son with me up to Canada. I took my daughter over to London with me. So it was like I was already doing international like before I had a single sponsorship. So
Wow. Awesome.
yeah, I mean that was really back when, influencing and independent education was newer. So
Yep.
I think that that was a good time frame for that as well. But also too, like word of mouth is still very, very important. A lot of my gigs were 100% word of mouth,
Yeah.
and the quality of my education was what preceded me. And I think that has everything to do with the foundation that I had prior to becoming independent. I think anyone can be an early adapter to technology and a great entertainer on social media and call
Sure.
themselves an educator, but really not have any foundational knowledge or even skill at facilitating a proper class.
Yeah.
So I had that. And it wasn't until pretty much like I had one sponsorship where they were just basically sending products to me. So at first I was traveling with my own products. So I was buying all this color and packing it with me and my mother-in-law stuff and my baby
Man.
stuff. So like you should have seen our luggage rack. Like it was out of control. But eventually I finally had Oligo start supporting me with at least sending the products to the classes. So that was nice. And then about 2019, my daughter had just started staying home, and I was like, lost the baby weight. I was feeling pretty good. And Victor Val, he was the guy who was running the Oligo Blacklight tours.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and he was the one who hosted my first independent education class in
Okay.
yeah, so now it's like coming full circle, right? So he had me at his salon in Pasadena. It was called Salon Sessions. He co-owned it with Nico Aberall, who was Halle Berry and Pink and
Yeah.
Missy or Kent. He was doing their hair back in the day. They don't own that salon anymore together in Pasadena, but anyway, Victor called me up and he was like, hey, would you want to do this little segment? It's only 45 minutes, yada, yada. The pay is this. It's, which was way lower than what I was making as an independent. And at
Hmm.
first I turned him down because I was like, what can you teach in 45 minutes, Victor? Come on now. Like, this is not education. And then he challenged me, and I can't remember the exact words that he said, but it went along the lines of like, you're so, like adamant about the quality of your education that it almost comes off as arrogant, something along those lines. And I was like, wow, okay. So that kind of challenged me to like, okay, let's take this format that you're doing, which is like 8 to 10 hours a day, because my classes can be pretty intense. And how do you boil that down into a 45-minute segment and still really get something quality across?
Yeah.
And then that was the first time I was in front of like, I think it was a good, like, I don't know, maybe 800 people or something, because it was in Texas. And Lisa Walker was the headliner. Lisa Loves Balayage back in the day, and then it was
Yeah.
a couple other influencers. So there was four of us, and then we did this hands-on the next day with like 60 people, and it was
Oof.
divided into these like 20 something groups, and they were rotating around to each one of the educators, so they got like a quarter of a day with each of us. And I was like, oh wow. So it actually taught me a lot about being more flexible, with how you create the curriculum, how do you work with other educators, how do you divide up a day. And so that was really the first time that I did a bigger, more stage show like that. So like 2018, I had started launching my online education during my maternity leave with my daughter. And actually that was the year I passed up my husband in income. And he was like, wait a minute, like you just had a maternity leave and like you just passed me up in income. And how is this possible? Because I'm like, master degree, like engineer, literally like overseeing multi-million dollar construction projects, building
Hmm.
massive power lines. So I was doing really, really well. And then of course, so I start doing these big shows with Oligo in 2019, and then boom, like 2020 hits, right? And I had already pre-sold my tour for the spring, and I had to end up refunding like $100,000,
Oof.
which thank God I had, because my husband manages our finances and he has an account called OPM, which means other people's money.
That's a great account to have. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's like, you don't get this money until you've taught the class. And I did know other educators that had spent their money
Oh,
and could
yeah.
not could not refund their tours. And I don't know how they maintained credibility after that, because I don't know. But anyway, so I was like, oh crap. And then my husband's like, well, it's a good thing I didn't quit my job to support you yet. It looks like it's over. But, long story short, I started, introducing more tools that I was selling, got those
Hmm.
online, started doing more shipping, not just selling them in person in classes, started releasing new online education that I had already pre recorded. And then that's kind of when some of the other brands started to kind of talk to me, but they
Yeah.
were also like, they couldn't do anything because everybody wasn't doing anything live events. So towards the end of 2020, I had started traveling also to whatever states were open.
Yep.
So I think I actually started traveling in the summer to like Idaho or Texas. Even
Yeah.
Vegas was open, and my husband was looking at the numbers. We had just gone through like more stressful stuff with his job, and he was like, you know what, like you still out earned me in a pandemic. So I think that you're pandemic proof.
I think you're doing okay. Yep.
Yeah. And his job was just giving him stress illnesses.
Yeah.
His anxiety was just killing him. Like, I don't know if you remember, but they had those back to back fires in
Of
Southern
course I do.
California.
Yeah.
And then it was the flood in Malibu. I mean, it was brutal. Like every time like something big natural disaster like that was going down, he was basically like part of the fire department, because in that sense, if there's power lines that are burned down or like
Hmm.
ruined from a massive mudslide, you have to rebuild them immediately,
Yeah.
because people's lives are online. Like if a hospital doesn't have power, like people die. So he would have to rebuild the grid like immediately, and then I wouldn't see him for like a month essentially. Like he would come home to maybe sleep. And that was so hard because at that point we had, two kids. We had a two-bedroom townhome. Now, granted, it was, our paid off house. So we were pretty proud of that. But still, we had a boy and a girl sharing a room. We eventually needed to upgrade at some point anyway. And, he was trying to work. We had no dedicated office. He wasn't allowed to go into his office because of the pandemic. I was trying to film stuff in my garage, literally, and it was just chaos. Like, thank God we
Hmm.
live close to the grandparents, because they were trying to help us watch the kids and still hold down these two jobs. And at one point he was just like, I can't do this anymore. And he was like, honestly, like I don't believe in what I'm doing, not as much as I believe in what you're doing, and you're making an
Right.
impact, and I want to support you. And once he made that decision to quit his day job, he was like, you know what? Why are we even in California? We could move literally 4 hours across the border and save $80,000 a year in state
Yep.
income tax. And you don't need to be in California. You travel and work all over the world. And so we made that decision to move out of state right at the end of 2020. Got
Hmm.
our new home in 2021. And that was the year that, everybody was now wanting to come back in person. And since
Mm-hmm.
my husband was behind me full time, I was like, okay, let's do this. I had taught a class in fall of 2020 in Georgia at Jacob Kahn's salon.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And he was like, Ashley, why don't you show up to any of the shows? And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, I've never been invited to a show. And so then he was like, well, you don't need to be invited. You
Yeah.
are a brand. And that thought never had occurred to me. And I was like, whoa, you're right. So when we were in Vegas, the Vegas show, IBS, was the first show to start back. And that was June of 2021. And I
Mm-hmm.
cold called them and I said, hey, look, do you guys need educators? And they're like, yeah, we do. And
Yeah.
so they gave me like a really good deal. They gave me like a free booth if I taught like, I don't know, 4 or 5 free classes. And it was crazy because we were like a big fish in a small pond. Like hardly any of the brands even showed up to this first trade show because they were
Yeah.
still scared of probably lawsuits.
Yep.
So, I mean, our booth was rocking. Like we sold everything out. We had people standing room only in these like, 200-person rooms with 400 people in them. And then I took all of those pictures and all of those videos and I sent it to Orlando Premiere and I said, hey, I just did IBS. Do you guys need educators? And they were like, yes. And
Yeah.
so that's when I started doing Orlando. So around that same time, that's when Schwarzkopf had kind of come back to the table and started like asking, me some questions, interviewing me. And then the same time, that was the same year that K18 was launching.
Right. Oh, right. Wow. That was big.
Yes. So that was the first year they showed up to the trade show. That was year one for them. And so they were like, who the hell is this girl? Like literally we had lines wrapping around the convention center and like the fire marshal showing up to my rooms in Orlando, like, no, you're past capacity. Like we need to kick some people out. Like they're just like, who is this girl on her own brand? Because at that point, like I wasn't really like, I had been offered BTC team, but it was for a
Mm-hmm.
product I didn't really believe in. So had turned it down. I wasn't Cosmoprof team. So I wasn't like, with the Rissa Love and Jacob when they were doing those big,
Yep.
shows. I wasn't doing any of that. Um, I wasn't really doing any of the hair showy things. Like I don't even think I even showed up to a single one shot award. Like so I was just like, literally like going through pregnancies and traveling with breastfeeding infants and like sleeping in the same queen size bed with my mother-in-law while my assistant got their own bed and we all shared one room. Like
Yep.
I was just like in the grind, like head
Yeah.
down, doing like 2 weekends a month, like, working behind the chair. Like I wasn't paying attention to the industry. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It's a different show. It's a
Yeah.
completely different thing. It's
Yeah, I
not
wasn't
what
networking. I wasn't doing any of that.
you were
So like
working.
I was just, doing my thing, building my own brand and trying to make sure every single class was the best of my ability. Even if it was like, every time I would have a maternity leave, there's a loss of momentum and you got to build it back. And so sometimes you show up for 5 people and by the time you pay your mother-in-law and your assistant, you've broken even and you still had to breastfeed on the road and, sleep every 3 hours and wake up and feed again, like, or pump like every 3 hours while trying to teach a master class. It's just like I was in the grind. And
Yeah.
so I was building, like the way I like to say it is like I was this indie band who was like showing up to every little dive bar,
Yeah.
and building this kind of like really underground, authentic following and relationships with people like in small salons across America. And that's why when I showed up at the bigger shows, people knew who I was,
Yeah.
but like the brands, the trade shows, the big marketing people like the behind the chairs and all these, they didn't really know who I was really. So it was like, who is this and how does she have all these people who actually want to sit in her class? Because there was people who had bigger numbers on social that were more
Mhm.
produced, and have created like the type of artist that really doesn't know how to put together their own, event. They were just basically put on the stage.
Mhm.
So it's like those sometimes those people, they're created by a brand,
Yeah.
and they don't necessarily have that same deep connection. Like I like to say there's width and then there's the depth, right?
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of people who are like really focused on the width piece, and I was only ever focused on the depth piece of it. So when people saw the depth in a wide audience, they were like, what is going on? And that's when I started, getting those bigger brand deals and started getting on those bigger campaigns.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean the width thing. It's interesting because the width thing doesn't pay. The depth thing pays. It doesn't. The width thing can be beneficial, but
Right.
sometimes it's just you're just good at making a name. You're good at making noise. You're good at being seen by a lot
Yes.
of people. Um, I mean, I see it a lot in the hair industry in general, where you've got uh, the most talented people I know are not necessarily the most successful people I know, and a lot of the most successful people I know are fine at it. It every now and then somebody's managed to do both of those things. It's uncommon, but it happens. But I get when you're building that depth, brands aren't they don't see it. It's not coming across their feed. The algorithm isn't showing them depth. It's showing them width. How much access do they have to people? Not how well known are they through word of mouth. I still tell new hairdressers that you can use social media, like use it, get on there, build it, build as much as you can. You're still probably going to build your clientele by people telling other people they had a good experience. It's not going to be the number of photos that you posted creates the size of your clientele. It might create a larger audience, but it won't necessarily create paid clients. And it sounds like you've done a really good job of building that part of it, like actually getting paid, hustling to get paid, not just hustling to be popular. Although it has turned out to be both conveniently.
Yeah, I definitely would say so, because I think what people don't realize that if you're going to do an event for a brand, you're going to get a day rate. And the day rate is
Yes.
going to be typically about 1/10 of what you can make as an independent educator.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I have a
And I mean,
business
I get
partner.
that it's fun. I get it's fun, and it's fun to go to the shows, and it's fun to hang out with the people that have gone to work at
Yes.
the shows. Like I totally understand going on the road doing that stuff is a great time, but yeah, it does not pay very much money. I
Yeah. So
interrupted
like
you.
the pay is the exposure.
Yeah.
The pay is looking like a badass.
Yeah.
And like you still do need to look like a badass sometimes, and you do need that exposure, and you do need to have like some cool looking shit on your Instagram to give people that FOMO. But then if you don't funnel that into something else, that's where it ends. And not to
Yeah.
say that you can't make, good money, in contracts, or doing, a lot of shows and stuff, and have a lot of fun. And obviously everything's taken care of, because your flights and your hotels are, everything's is scheduled for you. And if you're flying to Europe and it's, past a certain number of hours, usually they have to fly you business class, so it's a lot bougier.
Sure.
But that is a big part of the pay, is that it is that lifestyle. So I think it's especially attractive if you don't have kids.
Yes.
Because it's like, yeah, YOLO, like you only live once, like I got nothing else, like I'm gonna, I don't know, like when I retire, maybe I'm gonna be with some, like, in a nursing home where nobody knows me, I don't know, so like might as well live
Mhm.
now. Whereas like when you're like, okay, well, I gotta like have, first of all, I don't want to miss my kids growing up, second of
Nope.
all, I want to have a relationship with them and do good by them, and I want to see them grow up to be, good adults, and I want to be a part of their lives, and hopefully they will have kids, and hopefully I'll get to be grandma, and like when I'm, old at Christmas time, I want to be around my grandkids, and like that's my end game. And so
Mhm.
I always have to weigh these decisions of like how much, hype and badassery do I agree to at a lower cost that looks cool and is more fun, because I'm eating a steak dinner and
Yeah.
at some badass restaurant with these brands who have this money, and laying flat on an airplane to Europe. But sometimes you're going further farther for less. Or do I do a small class in the US with 20 people? It doesn't look that cool, and
No.
I'm staying at a Hampton and eating some like fake eggs, but I'm taking home that money and I'm paying off my kids' college fund. So there's a lot that, as a mom, my decisions are weighed so differently.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've got 2
um,
kids. It's all about that I'm involved in the decision-making process, but it's all, I can't just piss it all away. I
Yeah.
can't, I mean, I guess you can, but that's not who I am or what I want to do or be. So I hear you.
Yeah, so it's interesting because
Yeah.
sometimes, I'm around there, definitely at that level where you are doing those bigger things, because it is extremely challenging to also be present as a parent. There is not a lot of parents at that level, especially not women and mothers.
Yes.
And so it's like, you know, when you're at, a big global show, like I just came back from Brazil, for example, and like I was definitely the only woman and mother. Like it was all mostly men. Yeah, no, it was all men.
Yep.
And I
Yes.
think there was like maybe a couple females, but they were the assistants of the lead artist.
Right. Of course.
And so it's like, and I don't think any of them had kids, or maybe they had one and maybe they have a stay-at-home wife. I'm not sure. So like for
Yeah.
me, I'm just like, that it's just different. You can't always relate it at 100%, because they can't really understand fully your life.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, the people that I'm serving are the women and the mothers in the industry. And so they see me, and they're the ones in my DMs cheering me on. They're the ones who are saying, I took the last $500 out of my business account when I was just ready to give up, and I gambled it on your class, and you were the one who saved my career.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what keeps me going, because I'm like, okay, even going back to the first decade of my career, I had the opportunity to spend $100,000. Why? Because I was married to my husband, who was an engineer, and he had a decent income, but we also lived very cheaply, so I could afford that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm still traveling and taking education from the top educators in the world, including, my two of my top favorites are like Vladimir Sarbashchev. He's the original
Mm-hmm.
creator of AirTouch. Like he's actually my very good friend and personal hairdresser now.
Awesome.
And I've taken, classes from my top favorite Brazil artist, Romeo Felipe. Like, and so I've gone and I've taken these classes, and I've taken the golden nuggets of each. And I'm like, okay, like, let me give it to you in a theory based way. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to teach you a singular pattern, because I don't believe that education is about memorization of
Mm-mm.
one solution. I believe it's about problem solving and critical thinking. So let me break it down for you. And then this way you can choose when to use the proper technique in the correct scenario. And so that's what I go and I take all of this information and I make it so that the average part-time working mom in middle America can provide for her kids.
Yeah.
And that's what my passion is.
I love that. I mean, it took me about 10 years of doing hair before I had any sense of what I was doing and how to replicate it,
Right.
because people were teaching me the memorization method, and that doesn't work for my brain at the best of times.
No.
Mostly I masked really effectively and made people feel like great educators so we could move on.
Mm-hmm.
And then just did trial and error until one day I figured out that I'd figured something out. And it's nice to see. I see a little bit more of that. There's still not that much, as far as I know. People will talk about, well, I'm going to teach you color theory and then you'll know how to do color. Okay,
Mm.
I guess I understand what underlying pigment is and how to do that. It still didn't help me on a day-to-day basis. And I love when people break things down into systems and things you can replicate in different scenarios, as opposed to I know how to do this, but they have to have this hair if I'm going to do it. Otherwise, I can't. I don't know how to do that. Um, I did a bit of Sassoon education at the beginning. That was sort of what my apprenticeship was, and I loved Sassoon training and I loved Sassoon cuts. But I struggled with being told, this month we're going to do this haircut. Go find a bunch of people on the streets that want a haircut that no one wants right now. Right? I'm a 19-year-old boy walking on the streets trying to convince um, women that want Jennifer Aniston's hair in the 90s to come and get a one-length bob. And it's like,
Yeah.
first of all, stranger danger, get away from me. And second of all, no, I don't want that. And then they would come in and I'm like, why isn't it sitting the way it does in the picture here? And it's like, well, that hair is you shouldn't even be doing that on them. But yeah, once I figured out how to create systems for myself, it made a big difference. So it makes me really happy to see that you're doing that, because there's still not enough of that in our industry.
Yes. Yeah. The way I like to explain it is like if you're going to teach a kid how to read, you don't have them memorize words. You have them learn the alphabet, the sounds of the
Hmm.
letters, and then they are able to critically think and sound out the words. So I think that's a totally different approach. And my first continuing education was right out of beauty school. I did a 6-week comprehensive program at Sassoon's in Santa Monica when I graduated in 2005.
Yeah.
And, of course, like, again, those haircuts were very geometric, the shapes were very hard and not necessarily what everybody wants. The one thing that I took away from it and still apply today was the ABC theory, which is
Hmm.
shape, line, technique. There's 3 lines, there's 3 shapes, there's 3 techniques, and any combination of A, B, and C creates any haircut. And that gave us the ability to head sheet out a haircut as if drawing a map to a destination.
Yeah.
But that's just the structure. Then it becomes about the finish to the line. Are you doing a blunt? Are you doing a dry cut with scissors and point cutting? Are you doing a slide cut? Are you using a razor? And then what about internal weight removal, right? So then it goes, there's more to that, right? So
Yes.
you have to start with that ability to head sheet. If you cannot head sheet a haircut, game over, right? Then from there, I put that same way of thinking and teaching, but into color,
Now
right? We know
that
that violet,
fascinates me.
yeah. So like we know violet cancels yellow. So that's not what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
What I'm talking about is like, for example, I teach this class that's called the theory of highlight.
Okay.
And it's about basically when you look at the definition of highlight, it means to create an area of accent.
Right.
So when we talk about highlighting hair, what we're really talking about is separating hairs, deciding which one will be our accent, which one we leave for contrast.
Right.
So it's not a single process color. It's not a global blonde. She's not platinum. Some hairs will be highlighted and some hairs will be left. So we're separating hairs. So in the world of highlighting, there's only 4 methods of separation. There's a traditional highlight that's a slice or a weave.
Hmm.
Then you have open air painting, which is classic balayage.
Hmm.
Then you have your teasing or back combing of hair. And the
Hmm.
last one is air touch, which is using air pressure to separate hair.
Right.
So I go over each method of separation, the pros and cons of each, when you would use which one and why. And then
Wow.
I show a creative combination.
Where were you 25, 30 years ago when I started? That was not how that was explained at the beginning. It wasn't explained, in fact. Um,
No, and I
and
taught that lecture in front of 700 people from 20 different countries when I taught this. It's the largest global show that Schwarzkopf does annually. And it was in Budapest a couple years ago. It was the first time that they did this massive show since COVID. So then when they brought back their largest global show, they had me as their headliner. And
amazing.
I didn't teach anything. I didn't give a single formula. I taught theory
Yeah.
on a mannequin in front of 700 people, and people were like, "What
Wow.
are you doing? Like, you're crazy." And then I brought out 4 pre-done models. Obviously, I had live models. But it's interesting because the global director of education, he just retired, but he came up to me afterwards. It was actually 3 o'clock in the morning. Simon Ellis was there at the hotel at 3 in the
Yep.
morning when we got back. And I thought he was going to be tired and not want to talk to me. So I kind of walked past and he would call me over and made me sit down with him and a couple other people there in the hotel lobby for an hour to tell me how he's never seen anything like that ever in his entire life.
Wow.
And he was one of the original like Sassoon educators back in the
Yeah.
day who brought Sassoon from Europe over to the USA. And he's like, I can't believe it. You just taught a Schwarzkopf class and you didn't mention a single Schwarzkopf product. And I was like, yeah, because I taught you theory
Yeah.
that's applicable to all brands. Like,
Yeah.
and as a cutter from a cutter background, to see me do it for color, he was like, holy shit. So long story short, they did their global show again last year. It was in Milan, Italy, and they had some big players, and they said it was amazing. But they want me back because they said what they saw was more avant-garde and more editorial, which is more entertaining and
Yes.
inspirational, but not necessarily educational.
No.
And so they're like, we don't normally recycle a headliner for the largest show within a 2-year time frame, but
Yeah.
we want you back because you actually taught us something that we could work with in the salon the next day.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
I'm
and
like,
theory's
wow.
not, that's not, I understand recycling is what we would normally call it in a show. And if it were some unique concept that only existed in a bubble over here with this color line, I'd understand that. But like, theory's not recycled. Nothing else works without it. And
Yeah.
color, it's so great to see people doing it with color, because you're right. We've had theory and structure and building blocks for cutting for a
Hmm.
long time. Not,
Yes.
every school of thought wasn't built for every type of person, but we've had it for a long time. I don't even remember, what I started in 99. I don't even remember its existence. The only thing anyone ever told me was, violet cuts yellow, and that was the end of it. You add, at the time, it was like, if you want to make 6 out of 5 and 7, you have to use 2/3 of this and a third of this. And there was no foundation like you're talking about. It was just a little bit of math and hope for the best. So it makes me excited that you're teaching that stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting because now I have this challenge of like, what? Well, how are you going to top that, right? So, the next thing that I'm working on is how to combine the theory that I've created with the color with the theory of cutting. So
Hmm.
now what I'm trying to do is go even beyond that, right? So we have foundational theory for cut, foundational theory for highlight, and now how does that relate to the combination of haircut and color? Where's that
Yeah,
marriage? And so I do both, which is not necessarily a common thing
it's not at all.
at a very, very high level. Like if you're thinking about people who do a lot of these, larger platform artist shows, they're usually primarily colorists or primarily cutters or
Yeah.
primarily styling, and they're very specialized. So the fact that I try to do everything at a high level is kind of rare. And so now what I'm trying to do is kind of show, okay, now that we understand all of this foundation, let's take it to the next level and think about how these two things intertwine. And if you're trying to create a look, how you would think about where you're going to cut it and where you're going to place the color, and then what method you're going to use and work backwards. So I just did a show down in Sao Paulo for Hair Summit, and I did kind of like a practice run of my theory lecture. It's like a 90-minute theory lecture of cut and color, and it went pretty well. And so I'm thinking I'm going to continue to kind of work on that and get it ready, because this next show is going to be in September in Latvia, and this time it's going to be 1,000 people.
Wow.
So
Wow,
it's
that's a
like,
big show. That's big.
yes, it's
That's
big.
bananas. Whew.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I can't wait to hear about that. That's exciting.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm just going to shift real quick here. I'm cognizant of time. I want to ask you, if I'm a new person, either just about to start hair school or just finishing hair school,
Hmm.
um, what's one of the pieces of advice you'd give them for moving forward? What's one of the things people are missing? What would you tell them to do first if they're about to start doing hair?
I mean, I think the hardest thing is finding mentorship. So I think the biggest thing that I would look for is a mentor.
Mm,
And the thing that, the reality of it is like when you get out of beauty school, you have to realize what you've been taught is just enough to get the license. It's not
right.
real world reality. And so you need to get in there and get that real salon experience. If you rush the apprenticeship piece and get to the floor faster, it will set you back past possibly 5, 10 years, because I didn't have that assistant program when I got out, unfortunately. And so I had to go backwards and do all my continuing education while I was already doing clients, would actually slow down the process.
Hmm.
If you can try to be an apprentice for a year, 2 years, like, I would highly recommend it. Now, finding the right apprenticeship, that's going to be the tricky part. When you're freshly out of beauty school, you're actually not that helpful.
No.
So if a stylist is going to take you on, it's actually going to cost them more of their time than you are actually benefiting them. So you might even have to work for free, you know? So I think if you can find a way to get yourself on a budget and get yourself in a financial position to like earn very little, while you gain this knowledge, because the thing is, if you don't gain this knowledge while working for minimum wage at the, most, let's say, you're going to have to pay for it. And if you
Yeah.
pay for it, it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars. Now, I would say information is more accessible than it was, right?
Yes.
So like a Bumble and Bumble class was like, I don't know what, 15, $2,500, depending on the length of the class. My first Vidal Sassoon class was 6 weeks long in 2005, and it was $6,000. Now, $6,000 in today's money is probably at least double that, right?
And
So,
most of us had to get there. I mean, like conveniently, you weren't particularly far from the Sassoon
yeah,
Academy, but where I am, it's like if I wanted to, I had to fly to LA,
yes,
pay for accommodation, and pay for the course. So now you're in the 10, 15, $20,000. It's great.
yeah.
Um,
Like
but
I had
that's
to
a
drive an
lot of,
hour each way through LA traffic and pay for parking, but it's still cheaper than flights and hotels for 6 weeks.
yeah, I might prefer to fly over that, but yes, yes,
So,
that hour.
information is definitely more available, but like the thing is, it's kind of like a decision anxiety where it's like you go into a grocery store and there's like a million different types of like pasta sauce, so you don't even know which one to get.
Yeah,
So it's almost like too much information. And also, not all information is verified. Like the thing
yes,
about going to Vidal Sassoon is we knew that if they were an educator, they were tested on every single haircut before they were allowed to become an educator.
yes,
So there was an actual process to make sure that what they were teaching was legitimate. Whereas now, everyone calls themselves an educator. So we don't even know who's actually great.
yeah,
And if you're a baby stylist, how the hell do you know? Like you might be watching TikTok and think that's good hair. It's not,
yes,
but that person just happens to be very entertaining and very good at, keeping up with the algorithm. So that's the confusing piece.
yeah,
So I think finding a stylist who is actually succeeding in the area that you want to go into,
yeah,
and not just from a virtual perspective. Like if you're seeing it from like a standpoint of like they're good, like just creating content about it, like I want to see someone who's actually in a salon booked behind the chair with a full clientele where you can work with them every single day and learn from them, right? That would be the most ideal like scenario. And again, like if you have to work for free for that person and get a second job, like just do it, because otherwise you're going to have to pay for it. The
yeah,
other thing I would say is if you are going to pay for education, it's very important that it has hands on. So that's one thing that I've always kept the main thing, the main thing. When I teach in person, I always have a hands on element. Why? Because we don't do hair with our eyes, we do hair with our hands. So just because you watch someone do hair on YouTube doesn't mean, it's like you can watch someone play football, but that doesn't mean you can score a touchdown.
mm-mm,
Like the actual hand eye coordination is just as important as the intellectual understanding of the technique. So making sure that you are getting hands on education. And that is very, very rare, because if you look at most independent education classes, they are demo only.
yeah,
And usually they're pretty short. They're like 4 6 hours where they don't include the theory piece. Like I always start with an hour of theory before I even bring out a live model. I'm like, okay, let's go over the theory of this technique before I start putting foils in hair. Because if I just start demonstrating, you'll have no idea where the foundation even comes from,
yeah,
you know? So, like, make sure that there's theory, make sure that there's hands on if you are going to invest in education, and then put yourself around the right people that are actually doing what you want to be doing.
yeah.
That would be the best advice I could give.
That's fantastic advice. Yeah. Well, I sure appreciate you coming and chatting with me today. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Where can people find you either on social, and what's the next thing going on? I know you said you're going to be in Latvia, did you say, or Lithuania?
Latvia. Yeah.
Latvia. Yeah. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So my Instagram is Ashlee Norman Hair. Ashley is
Mhm.
with two E's, ASHLEE. Ashlee Norman Hair on Instagram. I'm traveling a lot internationally right now with brands, so I'm actually might not be doing as much in-person education here in the US.
Mhm.
However, I do have a salon academy here in Vegas. That's where I am right now.
Yes.
it's a small one. We're basically just starting somewhere. So,
Hmm.
I do have 3 kids, and, I do need to see them sometimes.
Yep.
So, for now, my third child, which I never even got to that whole story about how my when we moved to Vegas, my husband's like, let's go for number 3, because since I'm the one home. And so we went for number 3, and now
Oh my
he's
goodness.
finally in school. So he's in school full time. So all 3 of them, now that they're in school 5 days a week, I opened a salon suite. So I have a 2 station suite that I am doing private classes. So
Love it.
I'm taking 2 people at a time, and we're doing 2 days. So basically, like, one day is live model, where we do any type of transformation depending on what it is that the students want to see. And then the next day we recreate whatever it is that we did on the live model on the mannequin step by step. So that option's available. It has to be flexible depending on my travel schedule. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
Sunday, Mondays are pretty popular with trade shows and events. So usually the classes that I do will probably be more midweek.
Hmm.
But I kind of like that, because the direction that I want to head eventually is to have this physical brick and mortar become like a true academy. It's a bit tricky because people are so used to me being able to go to them
Yeah.
that at this point, people, like we were just saying, they're like, oh, I could just watch that online, or like, I can just make an educator come to me. So it's a little bit tricky to manifest this idea of a traditional academy. And I don't know, in a digital world, if it is a crazy idea. But, as
No.
long as I continue to build capital towards it, and as long as I'm, working with the brands, I'm thinking, eventually, instead of doing the independent education on top of the brands, on top of the trade shows, where I'm like so many weekends a year, as my kids grow up, once they do sports, I want to be a little bit more home for them. So I'm like thinking long term that this is the
Hmm.
piece that I'm going to be driving forward while I do the other things on the side.
I love it. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah.
dream. So we'll see.
Yeah. Good luck with it. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Happy birthday to that kiddo. That's
Thank
nice
you.
of you to take time with that as well. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what comes next with the academy. It's exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liam.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
You
Bye.
too.